Hello, Communications grad school students. My name is Melinda Zosh, and today I'm going to share some information with you about social penetration theory. What is social penetration theory? It is the process we go through when you get to know someone. So, for example, when you encounter someone that you've never met before, you may ask some questions to figure out a little bit about this person. For example, say I'm shopping at the grocery store and there's a long line. I may ask the person in front of me, so how long have you been here? Do you shop here often? And she may say, oh, yeah, this is my favorite grocery store. I hate to come here on the weekends, though. My daughter's really busy with her dance recital, and I'm supposed to be there, and I'm running late. So she may share a little bit of information with me, and I may say, oh, wow, I actually have a customer whose daughter is in dance as well. She does ballet. Where does your daughter take dance lessons? And then the lady in line with me may respond back and say it's somewhere close by and give me some more information. And then she may ask me, oh, you said you have a customer. Where do you work? So we tend to exchange information back and forth by asking people questions. So this is what social penetration theory does. It looks at how we exchange and share information with people that we have never met before and how we go through those processes and end up forming relationships or friendships with those people. Let me give you a little bit of a background behind social penetration theory. It was created in 1973 by two psychologists, and their names are Irwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor. First of all, Mr. Taylor actually wrote a scholarly journal article dated back to 1968 about social penetration, and the key here is reciprocal behaviors that occur when people get to know one another. So again, like the example with the lady in the supermarket, I say, oh, where does your daughter do dance? And then she'll ask me questions and I'll ask her questions back and forth. So that's a reciprocal behavior. If I ask her a question and she doesn't really seem like she wants to respond, or she's kind of short and she just says, oh, I shop here all the time and that's it, and doesn't ask me any questions in return, then I may not continue that conversation because I may assume that she's really busy or not really interested in getting to know me and learning a little bit about me. So it does take two people, reciprocation back and forth, to get to know one another for this to occur. And again, it starts very basic. So I may just make a comment about how the line is really long, or how the weather outside, it's really rainy and it's awful, or in New York State we get a lot of snow here, so I may make a comment about the upcoming snowstorm that we have. I know I've done that a few times back in the winter. So it starts very basic, just finding common ground with someone, making a comment about the environment that you're in, and just kind of getting to know each other on a very simple level. Now, there are two aspects to social penetration. The first is called breadth, and the second is called depth. So, breadth is actually the time spent getting to know one another. So if I'm in a line and the line isn't really that long and we're going through the line quickly at the store, I won't have much time to get to know the lady who's in front of me. However, if the line is going through the door, then I may have a couple minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, to get to know the other person. So a lot of the breadth aspect of social penetration theory does depend on that time spent getting to know the other person. Now, the other aspect I want to mention is called depth, as Mr. Taylor pointed out in his article in 1968. And what this is it's the amount of intimacy or the amount of knowledge that you actually learn about someone when you're interacting with them. So I may only have 10 minutes with someone, but I may learn a lot. That person may be more than willing to tell me about job, career, family, how he or she ended up moving to the area, things like that. I know in my job as a BMW salesperson, depending how long someone has to spend with me, if I even have 20 or 30 minutes, I may get to know a lot about that person and we exchange information back and forth. So we're going through the first couple cycles or processes of social penetration at that point. Now, this can also be gradual, so it can be just a slow way to get to know one another depending on how quickly the other person is willing to share information. If they come across as being very guarded and they don't want to share much, it could take me a very long time to get to know the other person. Again, it starts out as being very superficial, so just starting to talk about the weather, the news, like the daughter's dance recital, things like that. That starts out very, very shallow, very superficial. And then social penetration theory says that it moves from a superficial level to a more personal level. And really, it comes down to getting to know the public aspect of someone, which is the very superficial or shallow level, to the very core of someone. It comes down to basically taking the layers of an onion and peeling this onion away. That's what social penetration theory really is. You're taking layer by layer of this onion, and I'm really getting to know someone by peeling back those layers. Okay. Someone's public persona is going to differ very differently from the way that they act in private. It also comes down to a self-disclosure. If someone has a high level of self-disclosure, they may be more willing to share information than someone who's very guarded again. Also, there is a rewards and cost benefit associated with social penetration theory. What does this mean? It means that at the beginning, I can share things about myself, like the fact that I live in New York, the fact that I have a cat as a pet, the fact that I work as a BMW salesperson. I can share those things with just about anyone because there's very little risk associated with those things. So I'm not taking on a high level of risk by telling someone, oh sure, I work down the street and I can help you if you decide to come in and look at some different vehicles with me. So I'm not taking on a high level of risk. Now, I would be taking on a high level of risk if I told someone deep personal information about myself that I may not want to reveal without knowing a lot about that person. So that is the cost and rewards benefit. Also, I would like to talk with you a little bit more about the 5 stages of social penetration theory. Again, the first one is called orientation, and this is where we play it safe. We're just giving very little information about ourselves. We're guarding ourselves against the possibility of getting hurt and not really knowing about the other person. The second stage is called exploratory affective stage, and this is where we start to share more information about ourselves. So again, back to the scenario with the lady in the grocery line. I can say, yeah, sure, I have a customer who actually does dance, she does ballet, she works down the street, things like that. So I may go back and forth and share more information if we find common ground. That's the key. The more common ground we find, the more I'm going to share, the more she may share information with me, the more we'll get to know about one another. And also in exploratory affective stage, we are still feeling each other out, and a lot of friendships actually stop at this stage. So many friendships, or even some relationships, if you're just casually dating someone, they do not go beyond exploratory affective stage. This is where a lot of times people put up their guard and they decide that the costs and the benefits don't equal out. The next stage is called affective stage, and this is where people start to share more private information. So if you do go into this stage, you will start to share more details about your life. You may even start arguing with your partner if you're in a relationship at this stage. There may be more touching involved, so you may be talking in a closer proximity and touching the other person's shoulder and just feeling more comfortable in this stage. The next stage is called stable stage. And this is actually where a lot of relationships hit a plateau. This is where you can actually start to predict the other person's emotions. You're starting to read their body language, their tone of voice, so you're really starting to get to know the other person really well when you have entered the stable stage of social penetration. The last stage is one that is kind of sad because this is where a lot of relationships do end. So if you've reached that plateau and you find that you're not really sharing and disclosing information back and forth like you used to, then you may have entered the deep penetration stage. And again, this is where a lot of relationships end and people go their separate ways because they've reached some kind of area where they can't disclose any more information and they don't feel comfortable doing that anymore. So this is where the layers have been peeled and there's no more getting to that person's core at this point. And vulnerability is key in social penetration theory. So this is going to be a big thing with people being maybe afraid to show their vulnerable side, and this could be where a lot of relationships do end at that stage where people are afraid to reveal their true selves. Also, I do want to mention that there could be some barriers involved in social penetration theory. One of them is a cultural barrier, and this is where, say, I'm from a Western culture and I have a customer who's from a collectivist culture, say he's Japanese or Chinese, and perhaps there's a barrier there where I'm disclosing much information about myself, and say I'm asking him questions, and he may not want to respond. I actually had this happen with a customer. I was asking quite a few questions, and he was giving me one-word answers. So I was thinking, well, I hope I didn't offend him. I'm just trying to get to know him. But I think it was a cultural difference where I was asking questions. He wasn't really asking questions. He just wanted to get straight to business. But in the sales process, which is similar to social penetration theory, we've learned that you need to ask questions to get to know the other person. People like it when you ask questions because then you're showing interest, you're building rapport. But in this situation, the customer just preferred to jump straight to business and talk about the finance figures on the car. So that is one valuable lesson, that there are cultural barriers involved in social penetration theory, and not every situation is going to give the same results. So that is going to be something to learn looking at social penetration theory. So, looking ahead to the future, most of social penetration has looked at face-to-face interactions and how people get to know each other on that level. Since the theory was created in the 1970s, before the digital age and the age of the internet, people met face-to-face and talked that way and got to know each other by asking questions and reading body language. So at that point, they could read their nonverbals. They could see if someone's smiling or if they're frowning, if they look upset. You can read those cues and understand the nonverbals associated with getting to know someone. Now, in the digital age with the internet, you can't really read people's facial expressions and understand if they're joking or if they're just being sarcastic or if they're really just trying to have a good conversation with you. It's hard to tell based on the fact that you can't see people's facial expressions. So I would like to pose the question to you to ponder on: how are people going to get to know each other in the digital age, and how do you peel back the layers of this onion simply by talking to someone on the internet and not really being able to read their facial expressions? So I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me tonight on social penetration theory. And just to recap, it is the process that we undertake to get to know someone, usually a stranger. It's how you engage in friendships and relationships. There is still quite a bit of qualitative and quantitative research associated with this theory, and still much work that needs to be done. However, it does hold true in most cases that people will be guarded at first. They will reveal information slowly, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience to get to know the other person and to decide if the costs and benefits are worth it. So again, I appreciate you spending the time with me, and have a good night.